So, I am making a video that I'm going to send to uh, people. I don't know who yet. Haven't decided. Depends on who will have access to it. I do not know. Might even put it on YouTube. I do not know. Okay, so I never know where to start. But basically, I've designed an AI, or what I think is an AI. Um, but I have come up with a better term for what an AI is. So not only is our brain, whatever this term is I'm about to say, our brain is this thing. The AI will be this thing, and that I designed will be this thing, and like a silicon organism that what we all think about as what an AI is, that is also this thing. Okay, that might have been poorly explained, but whatever. So the term that I uh, created to talk about a brain, to talk about an AI, to talk about stuff like that, um, is complex network with computational equivalency to the universal limit. So, um, okay, so CNCEUL. Just write that down or something. But before I go into what those terms mean, I have to talk about another term. Can you see? Yeah. Okay. So here's a dot. Cool. Here's a dot. Uh, it is called a cellular automata. The dot represents a cellular automata. It's not. It might be actually a cellular automata. It doesn't really matter. It's a dot that represents a cellular automata. Cool. So this dot, this cellular automata, is a unit that has rules of interaction. These are the 8 rules of interaction it has. They are called Rule 30, and they behave interdependently to through time and space for this behavior to emerge. Right? So I'm going to go over that part again, like what I just said, again in a few seconds. But all you need to know about this picture right here is that these dots are not randomly placed, aesthetically placed, or even effectively placed, but they are complexly placed. Okay. So, complex network with computational equivalency to the universal limit. What do those words mean? Alright. So, complexity is what I mentioned right here. And I said I was going to mention it in a few seconds. Complexity is interdependent agents with rules of interaction uh, uh, moving through time and space through which behavior emerges on a system-wide level. So if I wrote those all down, I'd break every single one of those words down too. But it's basically a bunch of things interacting together, and uh, the the halo around them, the the system around them, has emergent behavior, which means that the behavior came from uh, the interactants below it. The interactants making it up. So, I'll get to that in a sec. Um, so that's complexity, kind of, mostly. That definitely is what complexity is. I just don't know how well I explained it. Okay, so network. A network is like a food web or the internet or a country or the federal government or whatever, stuff like that. That's what a network is. Computation. So computation is when you have a function, you plug something into the function called an input, and then you get out an output. That is computation. That is all computation is. Then equivalency means equal. It basically means equal. I don't know what it really means. I'm not going to Google it. If you want to Google it, if y'all want to Google it, that's cool. Cool. So, universal limit. What universal limits do y'all know? I know of 3, including the computational universal limit, which is a new one. New. It's like 20 years old. Okay. So, there's also the speed of light and the lowest temperature, absolute zero. Those are both universal limits. Cool. Yeah. So now we'll take the whole entire what was I calling it? Acrostic. We'll take the whole entire acrostic. In one go. So we have a bunch of interacting agents behaving together, causing emergent systematic changes, behavior. These interactants are in a network that computes at the universal limit. Doesn't mean they compute faster than anything else. It doesn't mean the network computes faster than a computer, because a computer is a fixed system with computational equivalency to the universal limit. All it means is that it computes at the universal limit. And I could have put fixed system in there, and that would be the definition for a computer. But I put in complex network because a complex network is what I'm designing my AI to look like. Alright, so how do we program the CNC UL? Well, I don't technically know how to program it. I'm not a programmer. But I can design it. So there's two categories of designed interactions. There's designed rules of interaction that we need to do to a initial particle, just like down here. Just like that initial particle, we need an initial particle, and we need to design it to do stuff. So the first thing we need to design it to do is to proliferate. Yeah, so there's a few options for that. Bifurcation, Fibonacci sequence, a blastocyst. any way to just get proliferating at an exponential rate. Next thing we need to design into the particle is to stop proliferating when necessary. And then form a new layer or a new lobe. Depends, who knows how I'm going to even get it to do that, but I'm sure it's possible. The next part of the growth category is that nodes need to be formed. We need to encourage node formation. And then there's like 5 other things. I'm going to mention one of them, but there's like 5 things that are necessary to tweak a little bit depending on where or what. It doesn't, it's not like I'm going to tweak it. The particles are going to be tweaking themselves due to nearest neighbor rules. And yeah, there's a few things like diversity and degrees of linkedness, degrees of separation. Those are, I guess that's 3 right there, but there's like 5 to 7. Who knows? I haven't looked it up yet. I've just been trying to film this video. This was all off the top of my head 2 days ago, and then I haven't. Well, I did sleep that night, yesterday, but all I've been doing is trying to film this video for a while. Okay, so let's talk about this picture. If you want, take a picture of it now, because I'm putting it back because I'm not going to hold it. Alright, so the picture with the blue line in it, that is a particle. That is the particle of interest, not the initial particle. For my patent, I will have to resolve a particle, render a particle. I will have to render a particle, render a node, render a layer or lobe, and layer the entire CNCEUL. Okay. Anyway, I drew a particle because I can't render it. If I really needed to send my patent off today, I would just put that picture in, you know? I don't know why I'm having such a trouble smoking this cigarette. Anyway, so the particle of interest, it has axonal connections to other particles, which means it sends a signal down its axon to other particles. Sends signals downstream. That is what axonal means. Dendritic means it's receiving signals which are moving downstream from other particles. So it's going to have dendritic. The bottom half is dendritic. The top half is axonal. Just in this picture. That's not really, doesn't really matter on which half, or even if there is a half to the particle. It just doesn't matter. So as you can see, there are logic gates in the particle, in the particle's connections to other particles, and sometimes there isn't. Sometimes there's just resistant connections between particles. Sometimes there's just regular connection between particles. It doesn't really matter. I'm just looking for diversity. I don't want too much diversity. I don't want too little diversity. I want a healthy amount of diversity, just like I want a healthy amount of degrees of separation and a healthy degree of linkedness, something like that. But the healthy part is going to be the tough part to figure out. Not really. It's already known. That is known information. I just do not know that information off the top of my head. Okay. So, as you can see on the picture there's an AND gate. That means both those particles attached to the AND gate must be triggered, must have a signaling threshold to proliferate their signal, move their signal along signaling network. So that is one of two things in the category of communication that we need to design into the initial particle of the CNC-EUL. Yeah, a signaling threshold. The initial particle has to have a signaling threshold, and all particles from then on out have to have the same signaling threshold. And yeah, that's it. The other part I already mentioned: diversity in axonal and dendritic connections. Okay, let's see here. Okay, this is like the cool part. This is the cool part that got me thinking on how to make an AI, or how my AI will work. Because as of now, right, as far as we know, in this 16 and a half minutes of my video, what we know right now is that we can get a network going, and it will complexly behave just like this, and it will have patterns of behavior that it would just behave, right? It has no input. It has no output. It would just behave. Not a great place for a living organism to be. Yeah. With no interaction outside of its system. Not a healthy place to be. That's why the virus dies after 3 hours or 9 hours or a day or whatever, because it's not interacting with things it needs to interact with. So it just dies. That might happen here. Well, I should say up here. And I don't want that to happen. This cigarette is just shit. It tastes good. I just can't keep it going. Okay, so here is Rule 30 applied to a cellular automata. As you can see, there's a pattern of triangles that would go out, like that. I'd show you a real picture, but it doesn't really matter what it really looks like. It does really look like this, Yeah, this line is really there. These triangles are really there. These triangles are really there, proliferating out that way. But this giraffe is not supposed to be there. This giraffe is not supposed to be there. This triangle is supposed to be an actual triangle. It's not supposed to look like what it looks like. Why do you think that is? I know why. It's because I made a mistake in my application of the rule to the cellular automata. I put a dot in the wrong place. I am human. I'm not a computer, so I put the dot in the wrong place because this is very tedious and this took me a long time to do. So I made mistakes. Or at the very least, I made one mistake. I probably only made one mistake in this entire thing. And then, boom, I probably made the mistake around here, and then it just proliferated out. It didn't get very far, because it probably only I probably made it 6 or so time steps. I probably made this mistake 6 or so time steps before I stopped, before I ran out of room. Yeah, so it proliferated out. As you can see, this part is untouched, but right here, the giraffe, that's where it starts getting a little wobbly. Weird, wobbly. So, yeah. So, what does that mean? That means my picture remembered my mistake, right? Now, you could say that any picture would remember the mistake. The Mona Lisa, you can see behind it that he painted something else. That's just gossip. I don't really know that, but something like that. Pictures have pictures underneath them because people use the canvases of the pictures to paint new pictures on the pictures. So yeah, we get that. This is a little different though, because if I just kept painting, or if I just kept applying the rule to my picture and just went like this way and this way and this way, who knows how long it would remember this mistake for? How long would it remember this input for? It could remember it forever. It could remember it for 50 more time steps. It could remember it for 100 more time steps before it healed itself back to the initial pattern, the supposedly ideal pattern of Rule 30. So that I know I explained that well, but I don't know if I can how to move on to my next part. All right, so we have CNCEUL, right? We have this AI. It is stored on a computer. We grew it, right? It's grown, and the nodes have formed, the layers have formed, the lobes have formed, the connections between particles has formed. So now we activate it. We initiate the signaling network, and the signaling network becomes active. Then we put input into it. Whoa, all of a sudden, we have this input into a signaling network, and it changes not the pathway of the signaling network, but the signals don't just there's already noise in the system. Some of the particles are firing already. It changes the pathway of the signals. It doesn't change the signaling pathway. It may eventually, when the particles decide to die, because they're not being used. But other than that, it doesn't change the signaling pathway. It changes the pathway of the signals. Doesn't change the signaling network, it changes the pathway, the signaling pathway. Something like that. So anyway, that input gets into the signaling network, changes the signaling pathways, and then we resolve it into its current iteration. So once we have its current iteration, it sends an output and it gets stored. Right? So it doesn't just send an output like it, and I'm not saying we send outputs. I'm not saying like I'm moving my arm because like I'm telling myself to move my arm. That was just like the current iteration of my brain moving my arm. Right. That brings up questions of free will and stuff, but that's not important. The output emerges from the system because we connected things that allow the CNC EUL to send signals into that output. And if it does it effectively, we'll like reward the system or we'll store the system or whatever. And once the system is stored, it's stored, and then we just run it again and again and again and again. Okay, so I believe that's it. This is going to be a programmed intelligence, not a silicon intelligence, not a human intelligence, or a neuronal intelligence. That is how it's going to learn. That signaling network pathway into the current iteration, into outputs, into inputs. This is a rendering of a particle, a drawing of a particle. This is my drawing of complexity, an example of complexity. When I went over the categories of rules of interaction on a particle. That is how we program the initial particle to grow the CNC EUL and communicate within the CNC EUL. And then we went over complex network with computational equivalency to the universal limit. Cool. So I think I did it. I think this is a good enough video. I'm going to send this to who I send this to, and thank you for watching. I have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to take it. Yeah, a few things I should talk about. So, like, if we ever run into aliens, right, they may be harder, faster, stronger, but they're not going to be, like, more computationally, they're not going to be, I keep saying computationally efficient. It's not the right word. They may be more computationally efficient because they're faster, but they're not going to be able to compute past the universal limit, which we already compute at, so they'll be computing at the universal limit like us, which basically means they can render anything if they compute at the universal limit, just like a computer does and just like we do. So don't worry about having aliens that are more imaginative than us. Then that's not going to happen. What else do I have to talk about? Earthworms. Earthworms compute at the universal limit too. That means, so why am I building a billion particle CNC EUL? Because I will be able to differentiate the lobes better and the layering and the nodes, and there'll be more of them, so it will have better communication, or less, I don't want to say less noise, but law of big numbers, just the law of big numbers, really. And specialization, that will be very important, eventually. Cool, so I think I'm done. These were complexly placed. It's because of the interactions of the units in there that they are where they are. It's not because of any design or anything. It's a law of nature. I'm not patenting a law of nature. I'm patenting the code for the particle. I don't even know what I'm patenting anymore. Whatever. I do know I'm patenting this schematic over here. Yeah. And I don't know if I'll be allowed to patent the CNC EUL. I don't think it will. I don't know. I just don't know if they'll understand it or anything like that. But again, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, ask me. It will give credence to my work.